Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. A couple weeks ago, I asked all the viewers of my channel who their favorite fantasy character of all time was. I got hundreds of people that responded. And since I let people pick up to 10 different characters, I got thousands of responses of different fantasy characters. So I'm going to right now go through the top 30 that were compiled in this list. It's taken me a couple weeks. It's taken a long time to weed through all this, but I'm glad that we're finally here. So let us start at number 27. There's a four-way tie at 27, which is why there's actually 30, but I'm starting at 27. This got 16 votes, and this is 𝐒𝐨𝐧𝐿𝐢𝐻𝑒𝐻 from the First Law. Now, 𝐒𝐨𝐧𝐿𝐢𝐻𝑒𝐻, if you've read the First Law, you might not know who that is because he shows up in the second trilogy, The Age of Madness. And for me, this guy made that series. He is such a wonderfully crafted character, and he's in that perfect Joe Abercrombie style of character where he's not a good guy. Now, he's not bad, but, you know, Abercrombie writes these really great characters, and I get that that's really in vogue right now, but that's what he does, and he does it really, really well. And 𝐒𝐨𝐽's hard to root for, but as you get to know him longer, you start to sympathize with him and what his upbringing was. You know, he's got all these flaws. He's got good things about him too, but he's just such an amazing, amazing character that you get to grow up with over these 3 books. And yeah, I mean, personally, I would have this guy way higher on this list, but I'm glad that he's included here. Also tied at number 27 with 16 votes is 𝗟𝗶𝗹 from Red Rising. And I've gone on the record saying that I'm not the biggest Red Rising fan. I'm so-so on it. You know, I liked some, I've disliked some others. I haven't finished out all of the series yet because I didn't like that 4th book. But for me, 𝗟𝗏 is the greatest character in the series. You know, I'm a sucker for, you know, best friends in fantasy books. And that's what 𝗟𝗏 is. I mean, he's loyal, he's a good guy, and he's also a badass. You know, I don't want to go into details about why he's a badass because I don't want to spoil anything from anybody that hasn't read Red Rising. That's a weird thing to say, Red. But yeah, 𝗟𝗏 is awesome. You know, he's just such an endearing character, even though it's hard to say endearing in a series like Red Rising when everything is so brutal and harsh. But you know, if there is one character that is like that, it's certainly 𝗟𝗏. So in the other 27 spot is the only animal on this list, and it is Night Eyes from Realm of the Elderlings. Night Eyes, it's hard for me to talk about Night Eyes without spoiling anything, but you know, I've never felt more connected to an animal character than I was by Night Eyes. It's crazy to think of this character that is truly just an animal, but because of the relationship that fits the main character in most of the books in the Realm of the Elderlings has with Night Eyes, he can understand what Night Eyes is thinking, which is why Night Eyes is so high on this list, because he's one of the only animals where you actually get to hear his thoughts. He's a well-developed character that also grows over time, grows with this character, you know, goes through so much trauma, is trying to keep Fitz on the right path, or the path that Night Eyes thinks that he should be on. You know, I've never heard anybody that has mentioned Night Eyes in anything other than, you know, the height of animal companions. You know, there's some others that can compete with him in terms of endearing in The Faithful and the Fallen, notably a couple different birds. But Night Eyes has got to be number one in terms of animal companions. I'm so happy that we actually got a non-human on this list, which is awesome. And then the last number 27 spot with, again, 16 votes is 𝐭𝐪𝐿. This is again from the First Law, and 𝐿 does this amazing character arc. And I don't think I spoil anything by saying this, but I love this. I don't even know if it's a trope because it's not used enough to be a trope, but when a character starts off as a bit part character, oftentimes they're not even really brought up in the first book or two, but they're a bit part character that you think is going to stay a bit part, but over time they develop and they become a main character. We're going to see a character in a little bit that does the same thing, and I just love that so much. It's such an amazing storytelling device, and you know, in the way that you perceive 𝐭𝐪𝐿 is in this very, very different light from what he becomes. Now, the first log gets a benefit of this character because it spans 2 different trilogies with some other books in the middle. And he's introduced in, I believe, in one of those middle books. I think in Best Served Cold, I think. Or actually, I think he might be in the first trilogy also, just very minorly. But, you know, by the time that you see him again, he has grown. He's become more of a man. He starts off as kind of a kid and develops in an amazing way. To the point where every time that this character shows up, I know that something awesome is going to happen, something entertaining, and just truly, truly a very, very entertaining character. And number 26 with 17 votes is Nynaeve Almera. And I'm probably saying that name wrong. I should get it right because I've read all of the Wheel of Time books. But I read them. I did not listen to them. But Nynaeve is my favorite woman character in the series. She's such a cool character in the sense that I did not like this character when I was first introduced to her. She came off too cold, came off too kind of like sarcastic and bitter and not somebody that I could connect with. But when you get a book series that's like 15 or 16 books long, your mind can dramatically change on characters over time. And eventually, I came to be endeared to this character that had this bitter take on the world. And eventually, her bitter take on the world has very good reason for it, because the world becomes a very dark place. And that is a needed backdrop to this story. She's such a strong character. And you know, I love whenever she's in a scene because she can bring this harsh truth that you know you're going to get. I love when characters are just brutally honest. And I think a lot of times when you hear somebody say brutally honest, they mean that they're kind of a dick. But I wouldn't say that Nynaeve is like that. She's just honest with a bit of a more, biting personality. But it goes really well together. And yeah, I truly love this character. Number 24 with 19 votes is Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher. I've never read the Witcher books. I'm actually going to start my Witcher journey next month. I'm very excited about it. I've heard a lot of mixed things about the Witcher series, but I'm pretty confident that I'm going to like it. Now, I don't want to have these preconceived notions because I have played all 3 of the Witcher games multiple times each. I love them, especially The Witcher 3. I don't think that's like a controversial opinion. I think most people that have played it are obsessed with it, but I'm certainly in that ballpark. Geralt of Rivia is just this cold, serious character, but he's very capable, and he's got this other side to him that you get to see over time. And it's just, I love how capable this character is. Not to the point of being like overpowered, but being at that right, power balance of, being calculating, being able to figure out things with a lack of emotion, but not being like all powerful where things could beat him. And, there's tension in this, but, maybe the game is very different than the books. I hope not, because if the character is anything like the character that I've come to know and love, then I can't wait to read these books. Number 24, also tied with 19 votes, is Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings. Everyone knows this character. I don't need to go into very much depth. He's just like the original badass, really like the original fantasy badass. Sword-carrying former king, just super capable, leads the party in the right direction. Everyone looks up to him, a hero, in and out, can't tell a lie. That stereotype that I think so many characters have tried to mimic over time. But no one's ever been able to write a character in that mold quite like Aragorn. I have, mentioned multiple times that I'm not the biggest Lord of the Rings fan, the books. I love the movies. But, he's pretty, at least for me, being not a Lord of the Rings nerd, and I say that with a lot of love because I'm a fantasy nerd through and through. So I say that as a compliment. But, he looks to be the same character and very faithfully done from the movies to the books. And I'll never be able to forget this character. He'll always be marked down as just that character when I think of like who can, be honest and strong and tough, and that you want to be your leader, and that's who it is. He's the original, Eddard Stark, and just love the guy to bits. Number 21 with 20 votes. There's a few ties here for 20 votes, and it is Harry Dresden from the Dresden Files, a character that I don't like at all. I'd say out of this entire list, this is the one character that I just kind of despise. Now, I get a lot of hate when I say that, but I just don't like this character. I like the character's voice when you listen to this in audiobook. James Marsters is just amazing, and if it wasn't for him, I would have bounced out of this series real quick. I think I read like 10 of these books. That's like a lot for a character that I don't like in a single POV story. But yeah, I just personally find Dresden to be unlikable. And, his views on women is very odd, to say the least. A lot of like sexism and gross perspectives on like young women, not even women, like underage girls. He has very, very disturbing views on these girls, and it pulls me out of the story. Now, I kind of think I come off as kind of hypocritical, because then I read books where characters act a very similar way, and I don't have criticisms about them. Characters that are in a totally made-up, fanciful world, and it feels like it's back in the Middle Ages, and I can forgive those characters more. They don't feel like real life. It feels like a fantasy story. But when a story is like a modern day take and like an urban fantasy, I apply modern day expectations on these characters than I would for these old school medieval type characters. But maybe it's just a weird thing of me. But that's how I be. So tied in this spot with 20 votes is Makwin from The Faithful and the Fallen. This is the other character that I mentioned that starts off as a nothing character and develops into his own. He is just such a badass. And it's it's such an amazing thing when an author can pull this off. And I love to be deceived when I read books. I've read hundreds and hundreds of fantasy books. So when an author can pull off a trick on me like that, and it's not really like a trick, it's not a twist, but when they subvert my expectations in such an amazing way, like has been done here by John Gwynne. And, I'm desperate for more authors to do this. And to do it intentionally, it takes a lot of forethought, it takes a lot of planning, and it takes a lot of skill to execute, because it shouldn't be done just for the sake of doing it. There should be a reason for it. And here, there's a reason for it. It makes you root for this character like none other. And there's a reason that this character, who no one would claim is like a major character of this series, I could spout off 5 or 6 names of people that are larger in the series than him, but there is a reason that Makwin is the only Faithful and the Fallen character on this list, and it's not even close. So the last spot for number 21 is Darrow from Red Rising. I mentioned him earlier when I was talking about 𝗟𝗏. Darrow is the hero of this story. He's the main character. I didn't love Darrow, and it was one of the reasons that I kind of got pulled out of the story a little bit. I just don't love him. And I think it's not so much like his fault. I just don't love the writing style that was employed to explain this character. I didn't get the depth of the character that I would come to expect out of a main character. It was too, dry writing for me to really, get myself in this character's head. But I know that's a very, very unpopular opinion, because almost everybody loves this guy when they read this series. And you should. He's the hero. He's the protagonist. And it's not like I hate him, but it's just, lukewarm about him. But yeah, it's how I feel. So number 20, with 22 votes, is The Fool. The Fool is from Realm of the Elderlings. He is another character that gets an expanded role in the series as it goes along. A character that I kind of despised when I first met him, because he's so, for lack of a better term, foolish. he talks in these weird kind of riddles. Nothing makes sense. He just seems like, a bizarro character. But as the series goes along, you start to see the real fool. Or I don't know if there is a real fool. I don't know if the reader has ever been informed about who the real fool is. I don't know if the fool knows who the real fool is. But that's just the nature of who he is. But it's hard not to be deeply, deeply sympathetic with this character, especially on the latter half of the series, and in the last trilogy of this series especially. You care for this character. You go through pain with this character. The trauma, the hurt, and not even just like physical hurt, but the emotional damage that this character goes through. And I don't think I'm spoiling anything in there, because like every character in the series goes through intense emotional damage. It's kind of like Robin Hobb's, hallmark of what she does. But she does it with amazing prose. And even though these characters go through horrible, horrible things, they keep picking themselves back up again. And you're right along on the ride with them. So number 19, with 23 votes, is the only Malazan character on this list. And it is 𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐵 I'm certain, because he is just a badass. And because he's not like this super well-written character. Now, he becomes more well-written if you read the super prequel series, like Forge of Darkness and like these, like the 𝐒𝐪𝐮𝐢. It's going to be a trilogy, but there's only 2 out right now. You actually do get to see 𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴. But I have a feeling that most of the people that voted for this guy have not read those books. Most of the people have read Malazan Book of the Fallen, and then they stopped. But if you've done that, this guy's just awesome. I mean, the guy has a sword that is its own dimension. When he attacks people with the sword, they get sent to an alternate dimension where something magical happens and something badass happens. And I don't want to ruin it, but it's just cool. He is, he's like the most terrifying person on this list. You don't want to get in front of 𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴, but he's not an evil character. He is, even though he's like the Prince of Darkness, darkness means a very different thing in the Malazan world. You'll have to read the series to understand what I mean here. But he's just not someone that you'd ever want to cross. And it's not just because of his sword. The guy is literally a dragon, as are a lot of characters in this series. But yeah, 𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴, just a badass. Just like look at what this character looks like. How can you ever say anything bad about that guy? So number 18 with 26 votes is Jon Snow from A Song of Ice and Fire. One of my first fantasy characters that I fell absolutely in love with, and not because of the show, because of the books. Now, I think show Jon Snow was awesome. But, I read the books before I watched the show, and this character is just amazing. You feel for him right out of the gate. Right out of the gate, you see him as this adopted brother that gets no love from his mother, that feels like an outcast and has to go. I don't know that he has to, but he feels like he has to go leave his family to go spend his life away from them forever, guarding the North, guarding the Wall. And he has this incredible character growth. You feel this pain that he goes through. You want to scream at him the truth that I feel like almost everybody here knows, but I don't want to ruin it for those that don't. Like, who hasn't read this or watched the show? But I feel like 99% of you know what I'm talking about here. And just watching him rise in fortune and lose it all and rise again and lose it all. You go through a roller coaster of emotions with this character. And you just can't help but wish for amazing, amazing things for him. Number 17 with 28 votes is a character that I think is criminally underrated on this list, and it is Locke Lamora, one of my favorite characters of all time. And he is from The Gentleman Bastards. Locke Lamora is a hilarious, ultra capable thief, like the world's greatest thief. He runs a band of thieves of his friends called the Gentleman Bastards, and their whole game is that they run enormous cons on people to try to steal their money or steal their valuables. He has the most And it's not just like sarcasm that he uses. He's legitimately hilarious. I don't love when characters unnecessarily curse in books. I feel like it can become too much, even though I in my personal life curse quite a lot, and I don't do it on this channel. I try to keep things a little more friendly on this channel. But when I read it in books, it can come off kind of cringy. Not here. It's so well done. Scott Lynch can curse like a sailor, but even way more inventive than one. But 𝐒𝐿𝐼 just so you just can't wait to find out what he has up his sleeve next. Every book is so entertaining. And yeah, if you haven't read Gentlemen Bastards, you need to do it. But you also would do yourself a favor by listening to these in audiobook form. One of the few times that I would ever say that you have to do it that way. Number 16 with 30 votes is everyone's favorite wizard, Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings. I'm actually surprised that this guy's not higher. Gandalf's just so cool. I feel like if this poll was taken 20, 30 years ago, this guy might have been number 1, but a lot of books have been written since then. So Gandalf, you're getting knocked down a peg. He's just like the original wizard. There's probably more than any other character. There's probably been more characters that have been written mimicking the style of Gandalf than anybody else in the history of fantasy. Maybe I'm totally off on that, but it feels like that's the case. Although maybe, Gandalf is Merlin, and maybe that's where it all started. But yeah, Gandalf, just that fatherly figure that that everyone trusts, that you feel like everything would be going wrong if he wasn't around, which is a major plot point in that first book. But yeah, just an amazing character, amazing depth, amazing writing that went into this character. And for me, more than any other character, even though I personally like Sam a little bit more, but whenever he's in a scene, it's so well written, and I pay so much closer attention to when he's talking and really want to just soak in the prose and everything that goes around, all the wisdom that he spouts off. It's just amazing writing, and I can't get enough of him. Number 15 with 31 votes is Jaime Lannister from A Song of Ice and Fire, another character that goes through crazy development as a character as this goes along. George R.R. Martin does so many things right, but I think the thing that he does the most right is change, and characters that end up as different people than when they started. That is where he is the master. He's also master at so many other things, but I think that's his best. And Jaime Lannister, I think, is the hallmark of that. Now, I don't want to ruin anything, because the change that occurs within Jaime occurs several books into this series. Several thousand pages in. So I don't want to go into too much depth, even though I feel like everybody here is already knows what I'm talking about. But it's just so fun to see. I mean, you start off with this hatred of him, and for whatever reason, you end up really feeling sympathetic for this character and wanting this character to succeed. And, if you told your past self when you first started the series that your opinion on Jaime Lannister would be what it is, you'd call yourself crazy. And that's amazing storytelling. And Jaime's where it's at. Then number 14 with 33 votes is Kelsier from Mistborn, which is surprising to me that he's so high up on this list, for obvious reasons. If you've read this, I can't say more than that. But he is, oh man, I wish I could spoil things, but I'm trying to keep this non-spoiler, so I won't. But Kelsier, when you meet him, is another, and I'm finding this is a very common theme here of really capable characters that end up being beloved. And if there's a common theme of all these characters, those are the ones that are going to be high up on this list. And Kelsier is that. I mean, Kelsier is the teacher. He's the leader of this little gang that has a major heist. I won't say more than that. But that first book is kind of like a heist book in a cool fantasy way, very fantasy way. But yeah, I don't think I can say anything else without unintentionally spoiling things, so I will stop talking there. Number 13, with 36 votes, is 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐻 from the Greenbone Saga. My favorite character in the Greenbone Saga, without a doubt, and I'm so happy that he's high up on this list. I actually didn't think that many people would appreciate a Greenbone Saga character as much as they do, but that's awesome. You know, Greenbone Saga really is going down, at least within the circles that I run around in, as an all-time great series. And that's awesome, because I love this series. Another character I can't really talk too much about, because the character that you meet is not the character that ends up even by the end of that first book. And I just can't say more than that. But just an awesome character. You know, you get, he does change over the books, but you end up seeing like who the real him is over time. And that's cool. You don't super get to really understand it. Like you get told he is like this person, but you don't really see it until the second book. And when he really comes out on his own and you get to be like, whoa, that's crazy. And I still like him. I'm still rooting for him. And even though he's a terribly, terribly flawed character, as you would hope, you know, at least I would hope. I love flawed characters. I love deeply flawed characters. And 𝐒𝐿𝐻 is most certainly, you know, fits that mold. Number 12 with 40 votes is 𝐂𝐨𝐧. I think I'm saying that right. This is also from Mistborn. 𝐂𝐨𝐧 is my favorite Mistborn character without a doubt. 𝐂𝐨𝐧, you get to meet this character and he feels so bland, and like so bland that it's hard to read when he's in a scene. But then to find out why he's bland, to figure out the pain that he's been through, to figure out what he eventually is going, what his, how do I say this without ruining anything? What his eventual path is going to be and what influence he's going to have on this story. There, I did it. Is such a fun thing to see. And he is involved in one of the coolest moments that I've ever seen in any fantasy book that happens later on in Mistborn Era 1. And yeah, that's this series. I like Mistborn Era 1. I find that I like it less and less as time goes along. Not because I'm reevaluating my stance on it, but just because I read more series that I like more than it, and it really brings it down. You know, there was a time where I would have said that Mistborn is like, you know, a top 3 favorite series for me. I just can't say that anymore. But this series wouldn't even be close to the top, you know, 10 or 20 if 𝐂𝐨𝐧 was not in the picture. Number 11 with 42 votes is 𝗂𝐻. This is from the Kingkiller Chronicle. Even though I practiced this name all day, I still think I messed this up, but whatever. This is the protagonist in the Kingkiller Chronicle, a character that, you know, I don't love this character, but I do love these books. I don't love the books because of the character writing. I love the books because of the writing in general. I love the books because the prose is just amazing. But the plot's okay. The characters are okay. But 𝗂𝐻 is kind of just a, you know, he's got these very immature dude. You know, the way that he talks to women is not like sexist like Dresden, but it's just like cringy. So many cringy things this character does. And it's just hard for me to just like love this character. But I love this series. And I will forever say that more people need to read it, even if that third book never comes out. Number 10 with 50 votes is 𝗁 from Mistborn. And I feel like that's like everybody's favorite character, right? Like everyone loves 𝗁. Not me. I like 𝗁. She's awesome, but just not as much as 𝐂𝐨𝐧. But, you know, 𝗁 is the main protagonist of this story. She is somebody who is trying to learn what kind of powers she has. You get to figure out the way that the world works through her eyes. You know, I don't love the love interest portion of the story that she's involved in, but, you know, it's not like the major theme of this story. But I just love how amazing this character is, how capable this character is. I love strong women in books. And Vin is, I don't know how old Vin is. I picture her as like an older teenager, or like maybe like 20 at most. Maybe I'm wrong on this. But just a super awesome character that has so many doubts about herself, comes into her own, and just really steals the show as it goes along. Number 8 with 53 votes, a tie, is Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings, who I just love. I love this character for all of the reasons that everyone else does. Just the one character, if you asked me, you know, who's the greatest friend in a fantasy story? And Samwise has to be that guy. You know, he's the real hero of the Lord of the Rings story. He keeps Frodo on task. You know, there's a lot of characters where, you know, they would not have succeeded had it not been for their involvement. I think that's a major theme of the story. But Sam is the one, for me, the one who everything would have fallen apart so many times if it hadn't been for this character's conviction. You know, you just feel so much that like you would hope that you would be like this character, although you probably wouldn't, because he's like an idealized version of a best friend, and everyone needs a friend like Sam. You know, I did a survey recently on my YouTube channel. I don't remember the results, but I'll put them right here. And I asked people to say who the real hero of The Lord of the Rings was, and a vast majority said it's Sam, and I happen to agree with those people. Number 8 is my favorite fantasy character, and this also got 53 votes, and this is 𝗏𝘁𝐿𝐴 Farseer from the Realm of the Elderlings, the character that you get to go through the most change with, not so much just their emotional change, although there is that, but just physical, like aging. You get to start the series with Fitz as a little boy, and you get to finish out the series with Fitz as an old man, and that's amazing. That's amazing. And it's something that I've never seen in a book before. Now, I'm sure it exists, but I don't know where, because most fantasy series don't go this long. And if they go very long, they usually don't span the amount of decades that happen in this series. You know, each of the trilogies, oftentimes you'll have an enormous time gap between the next one. And you get to see Fitz in these different stages of his life and what he has learned, what he has lost, what he has grown up to be. And more than any other character that I've ever read. I was immensely sad when I finished out this series, because not just because the series was done, but because I couldn't go along this journey with Fitz anymore. And I want so badly to forget this series so I could go through that adventure with him again. But I'm sure that there's so much to see when I eventually do a reread of the series that I will appreciate more on a second read. So I'm very much looking forward to that when I get around to it. Number 7 is also a character on my top 10 with 58 votes, and this is Mat Cauthon from The Wheel of Time. Not only does he have an amazing name, but he's just an amazing character. And I talked about this recently when I did my video of my top 10 favorites. But he's just so awesome for so many ways, not just because he's a capable guy, which he is, but he doesn't want to be involved in this story. He wants to just go do something else. He wants to just gamble. He wants to drink. He wants to flirt. He wants to be just like a frat guy, but he can't. He can't. He keeps getting pulled into the story because he's so dang capable, because he has to. And I love the way that he looks at the world. You know, I said it before, I think in the last video, and I'll always say it, but he just reminds me of, you know, when you, at least for me, you know, like if I see, you know, like a lost dog on the side of the street, but I have a lot of things to do. I'm late. I got somewhere to be, you know, out loud. I'm like, gosh, dang it. Like, I don't want to have to do this right now. This sucks. This is ruining my day. What, you know, ugh. But what do? I pull over, I go help the dog find its house. And that's constantly who Matt is on a much grander scale. You know, he bitches, he moans, but he does it anyways. You know, a lot of people dislike this character because he can say so many demeaning things to people. But I love him because even though he says these things out loud, you get to be in his head. You get a POV from him. And what he says internally is so different than what he says out loud. And I think that it's so much more admirable to be that person who is harsher on the outside, but kinder on the inside, than the other way around. Somebody who's being fake and in such a bad way, you know, like they come off as some like nice person, but internally they're just like kind of an asshole. No, he does it the other way, and I love it so, so much. Number 6, with 64 votes, is the last Wheel of Time character on this list, and it is Rand al'Thor. Rand al'Thor is the hero of this story. And I don't think I'm ruining anything by saying that. I'm pretty sure everybody knows that. But yeah, you know, I don't love Rand. He's okay. Just kind of like a middle-of-the-road character for me. There's so many characters that I like more in Wheel of Time. Again, you know, this idea that he has like 3 different girlfriends is a really weird character choice by Robert Jordan. And it made me just not sympathize with this character as much. You know, it's just so weird. But even beyond that, he's just kind of like a vanilla character to me. Just like an, you know, what you would think of when you think of like an average hero. You know, he's kind of a, you know, when I think of kind of when I see like a Frodo also, another character that I just feels like so vanilla and like, now Frodo I can excuse more. You know, it's one of the original like fantasy stories. But yeah, for a character like this, you know, he's just your run-of-the-mill hero, and I don't really have a lot more to say about him. Number 5, with 68 votes, is Logan Ninefingers from The First Law. Logan is awesome. His nickname is so cool. The Bloody Nine. He's only got 9 fingers. He's super badass. He's got this like split personality thing where every now and then he just turns into the Bloody Nine, where he's just like a maniac killer and cannot be stopped. It's super awesome. Even beyond that, though, he's like this wild animal that has to be brought into civilization and get along and make alliances and figure out his way. He's such a wonderfully well done character, and just one of the many reasons that The First Law is what it is. The First Law has a good story. It's got, you know, way above average writing, but the characters are what make that story. And, you know, this is one of the best. He's just such a cool guy that goes through like, but he's not, even though he's got like this alter ego thing, he only turns into it a small handful of times over the books that he's in. Beyond that, you know, he can be defeated. He can be deceived. You know, he's got these negative things to him, but he's also probably like the best guy. Even though he's like this crazy killer, he's probably like the most good characters in that entire series. But, you know, that's what you have to deal with, that when you're reading a grim, dark story, that maybe your best character is going to be a bloody killer. So it's just pretty funny turn of events there. But yeah. Number 4 is, with 73 votes, Tyrion Lannister from A Song of Ice and Fire, which is no surprise to me at all that Tyrion is the most beloved character, because he's mine. He's like everybody's, I feel like. He's so funny. He's so sympathetic, even though he belongs to the Lannisters, who are, you know, a very detestable family from top to bottom. But Tyrion is kind of like shit on by this family. You know, he's like this dwarf, and in this time period, dwarfism is not something that is a sympathetic trait. You know, he's not like everybody else, so everyone treats him very differently, even though he's like the most capable of the family members. I guess that's debatable, but you know, that's what he feels like. But his humor comes through so much. You know, he's like this really bright spot in the story that can be rather dark at times. But I've never heard anybody say that they disliked the Tyrion chapters. Everybody loves Tyrion chapters. Whenever you flip the page and you see a Tyrion chapters next, you're like, yes, get to read more from this awesome dude. Another character who just goes through such immense trauma and growth from the trauma. and just turns into, a shell of what he was in the beginning of the story. And I love this character from the bottom of my heart. Now at number 3 with 75 votes is Dalinar Kholin from the Stormlight Archives. I kind of thought that he would be like number 1 or number 2 because all I hear is positive things about Dalinar. I love this character. I love older characters in my stories, not just because I'm getting older myself. Maybe that's part of the reason. But I just love flawed older characters. And that's who he is. But he doesn't look very flawed at the beginning of the story. But when you finally get to that 3rd book and you get to get the flashbacks that go to him, you get to see how terribly flawed this character really is, what they've been through in life. There's some... I've heard criticisms on the prequel, every Stormlight Archive book. There's all these flashback stories that go back to, the growing up of this character. But this is by far the best. And some of them are better than others, but oh my goodness, they're so good. They're my favorite parts of that book, which, I don't think is a popular opinion because so many people love the modern day story. I do too. I love Stormlight. But it's just so well done. It's such a beautifully crafted character. And I can't wait to see, how this character develops with the remaining books that we have left. Now, number 2 is also a Stormlight Archive character, and with a whopping 103 votes, way more than the 75 that was just before this, and that is Kaladin. Kaladin has a nickname that I wish I could say, but it's a spoiler, so I won't. But Kaladin, again, is a character that I don't love. He's a pretty vanilla character. Kind of feels like a YA character. And I don't mean that negatively. I kind of do, but I'll do to say that. I feel like that I have to put that disclaimer out there. No offense to the YA fans. I'm not one of them. But yeah, he just comes across so young and dumb. And I like reading his story, though, because I like the story that goes along with it. But just whenever he's in the scene, it's just like, all right, let me get some more POVs, or let me see where this story develops. But I do love his POVs because I love the story that he has to go through and the journey he goes on. Which leads us to number 1. And number 1 is 111 votes, so a decent amount more than previous, and that is Sandon Glokta, and who I'm so happy is number 1. I wish it was Fitz, but if it's not Fitz, then let it be Glokta from the First Law. And we've seen so many First Law characters here because the characters are amazing. And Glokta's the best. You gotta listen to these books in audiobook because while all the characters are well done, Glokta's the best. He's this previous war hero that got crippled in this previous war and now is one of the head torturers for this country. And he's a detestable person, truly a horrific person. But he's so well written that I can't help but be rooting for this character. And you find yourself, I think a lot of people end up in the same place that I am, where you're like, how can I possibly like this character? How can I be rooting for this character? Because when you start the book, you're like, what? This character is atrocious. I'm interested. I love the story, but I want them to die a fiery death. And by the end of the series, I'm like, no one better lay a hand on my Glokta. I want the best for this man. He obviously has a lot more depth than that first meets the eye, but he is a torturer, and he does not hate being that. He finds pleasure in doing this, and that's a crazy Joe Abercrombie. Man, I love grimdark stories, and Joe Abercrombie might be the best in the game at doing it. And Glokta is the hallmark for a wonderfully written grimdark character. So that wraps up this very long video. If you've made it this far, I super appreciate you going along this journey with me. For all of you 300 plus people that took my survey, thank you so much. I look forward to doing more of these in the future. I probably will do I did one video on, what's the best fantasy series, but I think I might do what's your favorite fantasy book next. Probably not immediately soon, but look out for that survey when I get around to doing it. Although I'm not going to really be looking forward to doing that because it was a pain in the butt to go through thousands of different entries, most of which only had a single vote. So I'm sure the same thing will happen when I do favorite book, but I do, more than anything, look forward to reading those results, which is why I make these videos, because I don't see these videos made and I want to see this info, so I might as well do it myself. So thank you for going along this journey again, and as always, happy reading to you. Thank you so much to my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Anna, Ben, Brian, CJ, Donu, Darren, Jamie, Maria, Michael Sugarman, My Book is Lit, Nev's Book Channel, Romeo Mike, Ron Reich, Russell, and Sky.